Okay.
Yes, good, thanks.
Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to the Audit and Risk Committee meeting. I'd like to, Karakia was given this morning by Councillor Davies, so we'll carry that over. And I'd like to introduce Chair Pauling, who will give a mihi whakatau. Thanks, Craig.
O whakarongakia ki te tangi ata manu e rere rungarau e tui ea. Tui ai runga, tui ai raro, tui ai roto, tui ai waho. A tui o te heringa tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao tihei mauri ora. Ka huri au taka whakaro ki ngā tini aitua a kuhehatu ki te pō. A e ngā mate, o ea marae, o ea takiwā, o ea motu, haere atura. Ka huri taku whakaro ki te mana arotaki, o te tari o te manu arotaki, o te mate o tōna hoa Mark Maloney i tēnei wiki, i Ahitareiria. Ki te whānau o Mark, kia kaha, kia mai, kia manawanui. E Mark, moi mai rā, hari atura. Apati hono tātou hono rātou kia rātou, apati hono tātou hono tātou kia tātou. Tēnā koutou. Nau mai hara mai ki tēnei hui, ki ngā kaikaunihera, ki ngā hoa mahi, ngā kaimahi, a tēnā koutou. So kia ora koutou, just standing to open our meeting and just to acknowledge those that have passed away, and in particular this week, Mark Maloney from Te Mana Arotaki, or the Office of the Auditor General, just sadly passed away in the weekend. So just want to acknowledge him and also his family at this time. And I know that Graham's going to share some more words about that soon. So, but welcome here, everybody, and good to be here for this meeting. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Craig, and welcome Graham McGlynn. And Graham, feel free to say a few comments about Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mark Maloney was the Assistant Auditor General for local government. He had started in the Auditor General's office and then went away out into commerce and came back with a very commercial view of things that local government could be doing. And in his short time back as Assistant Auditor General, I certainly had a lot of dealings with him across my 5 councils that I'm on, and he was very pragmatic and really wanted to drive the sector forward, understood the issues, and he went on to sick leave. He'd been ill health for probably a year or two, but was on the path to recovery and was taking 3 months to take some real good time, and ended up in the Gold Coast with family, and obviously there were some unexpected complications, and he's now left us, which will leave a very big set of shoes to fill. So I'm certainly missing my interactions quite regularly with him, and will do over the coming months.
Thanks, Graham. We'll pass on a message to the Auditor General's office as well. Welcome, everyone. I've been informed that there is a quorum present today, and I'm pleased to declare the meeting open. There is likely to be a change in the order of business, and the meeting will go into public excluded with item 9.2.2 at 2:30 and remain in public excluded to deal with the remaining public excluded items before going back to open and remaining items adjusted to accommodate this. In terms of apologies, we've received apologies from Councillor Sunkel, who's on council business, Councillor Karakia, and Councillor Robertson, who's also on council business. Just confirming that Councillor Ward is on online, and welcome Councillor Deshay, who's also in attendance. I'm not aware of any conflicts of interest. There have been no requests for public forums, deputations or petitions, and there is no extraordinary or urgent business, and there are no notices of motion. So we'll come to item 7.1, which is the minutes of two of our meetings, the minutes on the 29th of August and the minutes of the 10th of October. And firstly, I'll take the first lot of minutes, which are on page 10, and they go through to page 49. Are there any matters of or correction for those minutes? None. And then the second minutes for the 10th of October, page 50 through to page 52. Any corrections required for that meeting? None. Then I'll put the resolution that the Audit and Risk Committee confirms the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meetings held on the 29th of August 2024 and the 10th of October 2024. Do I have a mover? Graham McGlynn, second. Councillor Southworth.
Yep.
All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Cheers. Carried. We'll go to 8.1. It's on page 53. That's the resolution status, and just invite Giles Southwell to comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. All items are complete, but happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? No questions. Thanks, Giles. I'll put the resolution that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the status of previous resolutions provided in the Audit and Risk Committee Resolution Status Report November 2024. Have a mover. Graham McGlynn, second.
I'll do that.
Councillor Southworth. Sorry, Councillor Ward, I just missed you. No discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Carried, thank you. We'll now move to item 8.2, page 59, the committee work plan and policy update, and invite Giles Southwell to speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. These are the two standing items in terms of outlining the future work plan and the policy update. I just draw your attention to on the work plan, we have added in a column for the next meeting, although dates for 2025 have yet to be confirmed. And obviously, once those are confirmed, we will roll the work programme forward for visibility and agreement by the committee. Also, just highlight that the annual audit management report was due to be brought to this committee meeting. It is still being prepared by Audit New Zealand. We expect it any day soon, but obviously the annual report itself and audit opinion has been received and approved. The report will be circulated, but then formally come to this committee early in 2025. In terms of the policy framework, it's the standing item. We anticipate now that the new GM P&C has started, GM People and Capability, that we will be progressing the work to consolidate and update the people-related policies, and also, as highlighted later on in the committee agenda, we are undertaking a review of the driving policy. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Giles. Councillor Southworth, sorry.
Thank you. There's under other policies, there's an enforcement policy. This is under Director of Operations and undefined review period. So I'm sort of assuming that's to do with CME, the Compliance Monitoring Enforcement, sort of part of the planning framework. So it would be good to know sure if that's the case. But given that we've sort of got a particular focus now on CME and have restructured in the operational side of things, and that I know when we were looking at enforcement and prosecutions and things like that, like where is that sitting in the numbers and so on, it would feel like it might be appropriate to actually ask the question, should, as part of our stepping up with CME, is that something that needs to be put onto the radar and given a date to do?
Yeah, so obviously that's under the council policies. As you'll see from that one, there is an undefined review period. Can certainly raise it with Stephen and David to make sure that it's picked up, and we consider whether it's still fit for purpose in the context of moving forward, and bring information back, and also when we review it, of putting in a review cycle as a minimum.
So the fact that I've asked that question, you gave me that answer, does that mean that now goes on to the to-do list, or does it need to have a specific note or something in your recommendations to make it? I'm not sure. I never know when things go on notes and when they don't.
Would you like a secretarial note on that? Yep.
Yeah, we've got that.
We've got that noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? None. Just for me, it's really good to see those lists of council and corporate policies sort of side by side and where things are at. So it's good. So I'll just put this resolution that the Audit and Risk Committee, 1, notes the current and proposed forward committee work plan, and 2, notes the status of council and corporate policies. Do I have a mover? Move Chair Pauling. Second, Graham McGlynn. Any discussion? None. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 8.3, which is my deputy chair report. I just the first thing I'm wanting to excuse me. The first thing I'm wanting to talk about is our current CFO, Brian Elliott. Brian has been with the organisation for 3 years and has provided a happy face down the bottom end of the table. He's reputed to be really good at engagement and has received scores. I suppose that's some kind of internal Korimai. Yeah, so the staff are really appreciative of your pleasant disposition, obviously. And the other note I've got here is you've empowered your team to make changes and improvements, and we've noticed that certainly in the last couple of years in terms of how things have moved forward in terms of reporting, the manner of reporting, and it has become a lot clearer and more informative during that period of time. So thank you on that, Brian. You've obviously simplified a number of financial processes and supported the changes around the core services, which is a pretty big task going forward, and we're now just beginning that process. You've centralised budgets, and you've also been involved with the updated fraud and procurement policies. So I just, on behalf of all of us here, I'd like to thank you for your time here at Environment Canterbury and wish you well for your future. So in terms of page 65, so we're on page 65. The other items that I've got on my list are to do with the independent chair recruitment process, and there's a little blurb there. We have actually now completed the process of the interviews, and we're just getting things together to well, hopefully reasonably soon be able to identify a new chairperson. In terms of the other issue, the organisational savings. As reported to the committee at a previous meeting, there was a need to find about $13 million worth of savings from the planned expenditure. Mihi have continued to identify sustainable efficiencies and savings, organisational-wide, and I'm pleased to report that there seems to be they've achieved this in terms of the 3+9 forecasting anyway. There's been a great achievement in the savings. An additional 2.9 million improvements in budget deficit is also forecast at the end of September. So we're in a fairly good position to continue with looking at savings and expenditure overall. And the report, there is a line-by-line review is going to be completed by the executive team to identify any further opportunities in budget savings, and they'll be reflected in the Q2 forecasts in January. And the other issue there, Audit New Zealand has reported to Council, and it's anticipated that their report and any recommendations or management concerns or comments will be presented to the committee at its first meeting in 2025. As we know, the Audit New Zealand issued an unmodified report on the Council's annual report at the time of the adoption of the report, and no material control issues are expected to be raised in the report to Council. In terms of the Chatham Islands Council Service Agreement, work continues between Environment Canterbury and the Chatham Islands Council to determine an agreed service agreement program for 2024. And so staff are working with the Chatham Islands Chief Executive to resolve that issue. The other thing I wanted to say too is this is Fraud Awareness Week, and so that's something that we always think about, but we will be updating and providing a report on those sorts of issues later on as well. I've got no further discussion on that, but I'll put a motion that this report is received. Oh, questions? You got any questions? Sorry, Councillor Southworth, and then Councillor Swiggs.
Yeah. So just in point 8 under organisational savings, it says that continuing to identify sustainable efficiencies and savings. I just wonder if that can give a couple of sort of like real examples. What sort of things are we managing to save, or how, or what? Is that possible?
Brian, are you able to answer where the just a couple of examples of specifically perhaps where the substantial savings might have been made?
Yes, there was a pattern of delays in recruitment and starting of some programs which allowed a certain budgetary space in the first quarter, which actually amounted to quite a substantial amount of money. There were also elements like the drop in the interest rates currently is potentially going to save us $1 million a year in the current year. So it's a across the board mixture, but it tends to be a lot of it is very focused on the labour and our ability to fill some of those positions.
So in a way, those are things that sort of have happened to us rather than things that we've explicitly identified as something we can influence and change ourselves. Like interest rates isn't something. I mean, I accept that, of course, if we move, you do the math and work out, do we shift from one thing to another and all those things. I'm not saying it just happens, but just because I know data. I thought programming, IT, and data software was a particular thing. So has that got to a place where we're saving in terms of some of that, simplifying the software programs that we're using and all that stuff, or is that still to come?
Yeah, there is an element of things like that which may not actually get done during the year, some which are slightly delayed, And as I say, the thing about it is we have gone into it with a very focused view that where we see underspending occurring, we will ring fence that deliberately, and people can't then do what they've done in past years, take that money and go off and do something else, because we know we had this target to meet. So it has been a very conscious decision.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Swiggs.
I circulated some questions earlier in relation to the Chatham Islands issue. I don't necessarily want to, and they're on behalf of Councillor Karakia, I don't necessarily want to read them out, but is there any update or response that can be given in light of the information that you've seen?
I'll go first, and then Giles can pick up, because we had a meeting. Giles and I had a meeting with the Mayor of the Chatham Islands and the CEO and the Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee as well. And look, we at the end of that, the relationship is important. Of course, it is. There are some issues that we're trying to work through, and it's a lot about specifying, being really clear about the work program, because the funding has dropped away from central government. So that's the issue we're facing. There's not as much money as there was in the past. You can't do the same job you did for that money. So we really need to fine tune that. And that's what the work that Giles and Paul have agreed to work on together, to see if they can specify and come in on budget effectively. So yeah, that's what we're working through right at the moment, is for this financial year. And then looking forward to the next financial year, what does that look like? And then the contract there's an end date of that contract there that we're trying to work towards. So yeah.
So yeah, just to add to
Just to note, Councillor Karakia's come on.
So just to add to what Chair Pauline has said, this committee will recall that last year in 23 we had an internal audit done explicitly to review the nature of the relationship and the contractual relationship, given that the previous chief executive of the Chathams was retiring after approximately 20 years. And it was a good opportunity to then use that as an opportunity to reset and review roles and responsibilities. I think that both organisations would recognise that that process has been or is and continues to be extremely useful, but has probably been more challenging than either of us anticipated, just because the relationship has existed for 20 years and therefore those roles and responsibilities have blurred over time. So as part of recognising the unique nature of the relationship, we do need to recognise that we have to be clear on the roles and responsibilities between the two organisations, and that whilst in many instances we are more than a service provider, ultimately we are also a service provider and cannot take on Chatham Islands accountabilities. Myself and Paul are working through those arrangements. We plan to have a very clear programme of work for the current financial year before the end of the calendar year, and to use the first half of next year to work on the programme for 25-26. And then, as Craig has indicated, there is an end date to the contract, which clearly both organisations need to consider.
And just one other point that I think is relatively important: has there been any work with LG&Z, either from the Chatham Islands Council or from us, to sort of support advocacy towards their funding issues that they face?
So I did raise that at the meeting, Dion, and offered to obviously advocate with them to government about the funding. The response was really they don't think there is any more money. They've asked numerous times, and the answer's been clearly no a number of times. But we did offer that, and so that is still part of the conversation. If the Chathams want us to go with them, we will, because obviously it's in our interest as well, because the money has been cut and it is making it tough. So, yeah, we've definitely asked, but there's nothing specific on the table because they didn't feel it was worthwhile at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. No further questions? Okay, I'll put a resolution that the Audit and Risk Committee receives the report from the Deputy Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. Do I have a mover? Councillor Swiggs. Second, Councillor Southworth. Any further discussion?
Sorry, can I
Councillor Karakia.
Sorry, yeah, kia ora. Hey, before you do that, sorry, I just I couldn't get on and I just went off again. But can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, cool. So I hope that the questions that I sent through, and I heard probably the kind of last part of it. I think the important thing here, though, as a Ngaitohu councillor, is to make the point that there is Ngaitohu whānui actually living over on the Chathams. In fact, a part of the three iwi, Ngāti Mutunga, Mori Hori, and also Ngaitohu. So, and I just a couple of comments from Giles is that, yes, it's actually about understanding the relationship over there, and particularly from a Ngaitohu perspective, and then acknowledging, the relationship it's had with Canterbury Regional Council for almost 20 years. So that's the first part of it, and that was acknowledged by you as well, I think, Giles. The other part, Craig, I just heard the final part of what you were saying, and then I remember because you did meet Kanohi with the Mayor, Chatham Island Mayor, and also the CE. The other part of it, though, is probably around, you said, Giles, that it might be before the end of the year that you have some kind of resolution or solution. So it would be good to know, what that timing is. And then you brought up the local government New Zealand part of it, which was in the question. I think that we need to, first of all, be cognizant of the history of this. The other part is that moving it forward, even though Rongotai is the electorate that is responsible, that where Whare Kauri comes under, and that's part of the special relationship that Canterbury Regional Council has, particularly with the Canterbury relationship. That there needs to be revisited as well, doesn't it? I mean, so it's what we're trying to do is assist with limited kind of funds that we have now. So I think we all need to look at more holistically at this, because that's actually managing a couple of risks here. One is that historical relationship risk. The other one, obviously, is about our budgets and all of that. But I think that in understanding the relationship and trying to sort of move it forward, I think they need to know up front, exactly what what our strategy is going to be with the Chatham Islands Council. That's all I'm saying. That was the reason for those questions. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, we did discuss that. That's exactly what we discussed, trying to get clarity around working together going forward, and we acknowledge the relationship, the longevity of it, the uniqueness of it. There are other councils in New Zealand that provide services to the Chathams as well. We're not the only ones. I think it's Hamilton and Wellington. So they've got a couple of other contracts that they have, as well as they have private contracts as well to help them with their business. So that's some of the, and with the former CEO, he was really on top of that, and it's sort of a massive complex matter to just unravel. So that's what we're all working towards. So we're really trying really hard with them. It was a really good meeting. We walked out of that room in a positive frame, so I'm confident that there's some good stuff there. And like we said, we offered our support to advocate with them to LGNZ or to the government if they want. So it's good.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. I appreciate that. But I think the special relationship and why we continue to have it, there is that Ngaitohu link to it, as well as historically, Canterbury Regional Council, but the Ngaitohu thing is where I'm coming from. Okay.
Thanks very much for those comments, and obviously everyone's working together to try to resolve the situation as fast as we can. So the motion's been put. First, we've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. We'll move to item 8.4, health, safety and wellbeing update, and invite Giles to talk to that report. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll take the report as read. Just want to highlight a couple of items. We have included the critical controls in terms of the areas of health and safety that we're working on. There's only one left to approve, and that's related to air travel, I believe, but also to highlight the extensive work that's been done in relation to driving, and also, as I mentioned earlier, the important work that's being done going forward, including ensuring that the policy is reviewed to ensure that it is fit for purpose or amended to be fit for purpose, and that it explicitly includes references to not only staff but also to councillors where appropriate, and also to highlight the work that's going on in relation to the health and safety issue related to bike racks on buses. That continues to be an issue of concern from a health and safety perspective to bus operators and ourselves. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Giles. Any questions for Giles? Councillor Southwood?
Well, just on the bike racks, I just wondered whether there's any further update on progress, or, you know, we're getting a timetable in terms of looking at checking all the bus and rack combinations, which is what I believe is to happen. So are we actually getting on with that already?
So the NZTA, the bus and coach association, and the PTAs have convened a working group to work through the technical issues about how do you certify that a bus is compliant and what would need to be done, what checklist is appropriate, who needs to be trained, who can do it, and how would they be certified, which is progressing. We are represented on that working group. I also sit on the steering group as and when it's convened to agree that approach. We know that the Bus and Coach Association have taken legal advice, which is the basis of the withdrawal of those that functionality from our current services, and that we, on behalf of the PTAs, are currently obtaining legal advice for the PTAs, given our position in the relationship. We are all keen to resolve the issue as soon as possible, but recognise that until the law is clarified, there is a health and safety risk that the bus and coach operators are currently not prepared to accept, and we, as the PTAs, cannot instruct the BCA or the operators without taking that risk onto ourselves.
So in terms of the timeline, because we had sort of said until, was it March of next year? I'm trying to remember now, there was a date we sort of had it up to. Like, are we realistically looking at taking up to that date, or are we now saying it could be like a year away? And we got
So the original safety notice from NZTA related to buses operating with bike racks at night. Our original timeline was to cover the summer period to give us sufficient time to do the testing that we believe need to be undertaken at the time, recognising that there still wasn't an approach to go, well, what is a safe arrangement? The Bus and Coach Association have interpreted the actual rule, the legislation, if you like, as not differentiating between day and night, and therefore that's why there's a complete ban on putting bikes on bike racks on buses. Until that is resolved, we hope and anticipate that it can be resolved reasonably quickly, but we have no timeline currently. We're working as hard as we can, as is the working group will come up with a technical solution and a technical approach, but until the buses have been tested, unless there is some other solution, we currently have a blanket exemption to have bike racks in the first place. My understanding is that bike racks, by their definition, create a vehicle that is too long and therefore has an exemption to run with a bike rack in its horizontal position. We don't have an exemption to run with bike racks with bikes on, with the headlights either on or off currently, which I think is part of the impasse.
So working as fast as you can, as fast as you can influence it, and you will keep us updated as and when there's a. I mean, I think the public would just like, even if as soon as there's a heads up of a timeline, that in itself would be really, really helpful.
As soon as we get more information, as I said, we're represented on the working group. The working group have made good progress, and I believe that they're looking for a date for a steering group meeting. Clearly, steering group members will want to consult. BCA representative will need to consult with the operators before they attend, but we anticipate that being in a relatively short time frame, and then hopefully we can provide an update on where to from here.
Great, thank you very much for that, Councillor Swiggs, and then followed by Councillor Karakia.
Yeah, so the in regards to all of the critical risk control compliances, do we have any baselines that we have as a starting point for any of those? So like, the baseline, so that we have targets for improvements or we know where we're at and all those kind of things. So it's not there, but do you have them?
So the critical risk controls are the checks that people must undertake before that work commences. So we recognise that now we have those agreed, we need to put in place the processes to ensure that those checks, that staff are trained and made aware, and training is going on currently for staff to make sure that staff know what they need to do before that work is undertaken. And then we need to put in place the mechanisms to ensure reporting against that, so we can provide the assurance that people are doing the checks they should be doing. And we will be providing that reporting as that becomes available. But there are no baselines because we have currently, in many of these areas, we don't have necessary data to tell us whether the checks are or are not being undertaken.
So that's something that can be created over time. So maybe we need just to mention that baselines are going to be created. I'm not sure if that was in there or not. I didn't see it. I think that would be quite useful for a high level reporting, as to understand those baselines in the future. The other one I wanted to ask about was the targeted deep dive into the driving. I don't want to get too into detail about it, but what I want to understand is, and I'm just trying to find the damn where I was reading this, but it talked about fleet vehicles, and the policy relates to fleet vehicles, but I don't understand what that means in terms of vehicles that are provided by UCAN but aren't fleet vehicles, that are come out of their wages, or they come out of people's wages. So how does the policy relate to those people? If it doesn't, then why are we measuring that and got systems in place?
So the current policy treats all vehicles as fleet vehicles. It doesn't differentiate between those that are secured by a director under salary sacrifice or that are allocated to the chair for use for council business. And so they are all counted as fleet vehicles. One of the reasons we want to review the policy is to recognise or to consider how we recognise the distinction that you have highlighted.
And so that is that distinction has been looked at.
So that's our intention, is to review which vehicles the policy should apply to, and should there be any exceptions, recognising that they are ultimately all Environment Canterbury vehicles.
Thank you. Councillor Karakia?
Kia ora. Actually, there were three things that I wanted to bring up. One was driving, and the targeted deep dive, which Councillor Swiggs has actually covered off. I think the only question I have is, and it was actually around because when we look at the the case that has actually highlighted all of this, is that it was the reporting back or alerting the perpetrator or potential or so-called perpetrator of excessive speeds, all of that it's actually there's actually a time limit. I see you've got here the Chief Executive will ensure one-to-one conversation with councillors are held if they have excessive or repeated moderate speed events in fleet vehicles. Only moderate. Why not? Why aren't we just any speed over the speed limit? Why do we have to concentrate on just moderate for councillors? That's one question. And the other one is that are all these points on 18 in the work plan, and were they ever actually part of the original process itself as to alerting, particularly councillors that over the last week, 2 weeks, month, the GPS has recorded that you actually have contravened the speed limits X amount of times. Was that ever part of the process?
So the process is that reports are provided to line managers, and as we highlight in the report, that process has been in place and continuing. The exceptions to that were that directors were not receiving the reports, and neither was either at the time the director or the chief executive in respect of any councillors. That was the area that resulted in the events that you're talking about, Councillor Karakia. Those reports have now been re-established for directors. I received the report from my staff last week for October, and the report in relation to any councillors exceeding the speed limit in relation to use of Environment Canterbury vehicles goes to the Chief Executive.
Right.
That details all excessive or all speed limits. It's a question of what the nature of the conversation that takes place. So if there are a couple of minor excessive speeds, then it's a reasonably light touch conversation. I know that I've had one with one of my members of staff. Obviously, if it is extreme or it's repeated, then action escalates as appropriate. We've also recognised the importance, of ensuring that the policy is more explicit about its reference to councillors, and that appropriate education, guidance, and awareness is provided to councillors, particularly through the induction process, and that will obviously be put in place as part of the next triennium in 2025.
Kind of shutting the door after the horse has bolted, but anyway, at least it's happening. What about, and I'm not sure whether it still operates, but with the Whakakapi and also traffic police, there is a 10-kilometre, what do they call it? If it's 100, well, then they will forgive up until 110. Is there any kind of is there any kind of forgiveness thing there? And what we're saying, was it exactly what it is, the speed limit?
So my understanding is that there is no official 10%, although that's, and if you actually notice, if you are driving a GPS vehicle with a speed on the GPS, the GPS and the speedometer often register different speeds, because manufacturers actually allow for a degree of error in their speedometers, is my experience. Sorry, I can't remember the second part of your question, Councillor.
No, you're right. It's already.
Oh, so
you've already answered.
So we do. I mean, obviously, that's one of the reasons why we differentiate between minor, moderate, and excessive. And whilst there is also an allowance for overtaking on the open road, to recognise that there are circumstances where you need to, or you don't need to, but it is actually safer to exceed the speed limit to overtake a vehicle rather than stay within the speed limit and increase the risk.
Okay. Just one more question about this, and I don't see it in here unless I've missed it, and I went looking for it. All of this information and the confidentiality of this information, what steps are in place? Because obviously, and we've seen what can happen here, if this information is not confidential, well, then we run into the unfortunate situation that has happened, possibly. So
Can't
is
answer
this
that,
information?
but we can make sure that's included in the review process in the final document.
That it's confidential.
Well, some reference to confidentiality and who sees what.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Thank you. So that's the first one. The other one is, and I'm just thinking about the optics here. I'm talking about bike racks now. And, just looking at the local newspapers and the feedback from the public is all kind of negative to it. And I know that it's a kind of a Whakakapi thing in some ways. I just wondered have we ever looked at putting the bike racks on the back of the bus?
Same issue would apply in terms of rear tail lights.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, they used to have reflectors, that come on that. Anyway.
So if you have a bike rack, on the back of your car, obviously you're supposed to ensure that the brake lights and tail lights are visible, or you're supposed to put an additional.
But probably the key to it is having them in the front as close to the driver and the first door, and so that the driver's not going to drive off when you haven't quite got to the back of the bus to unload your bike. Anyway,
they've got cameras and all that sort of stuff. The thing that I saw was that didn't look safe is a big bull bar on the front with a whole lot of bikes. That would be more dangerous than on the back. Anyway, doesn't matter. I got one more question. And it's about councillor safety at the ECAN headquarters. Where are we at with that?
Safety at our headquarters. Are you referring to page 77 where it has a non-critical risk reporting issue? Are you looking at those sort of things on there, are you?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
In particular, are you looking at the first one, people in unauthorised areas?
Yeah.
So your queries about that. Are we able to answer that?
So over the last 18 months, 2 years, we have introduced separate identification and access cards. We have reminded staff and councillors to display the ID card when in the building and to feel free to challenge people who they don't recognise and they can't see an ID on. We have tested the security arrangements around the building, but we always recognise that there is room for improvement. We have, for the last, pretty much for at least 2.5 years since in my experience, had a security guard permanently at the office, which was introduced at a period of heightened tension, and continue to have a security protocol that people use when there are meetings planned that we suspect may be either contentious or to have attendees that may have a higher risk associated with them, and increased security arrangements are put on place. It's something that I know Stephanie and myself take extremely seriously, and we believe that the arrangements we have, as demonstrated in the security risk assessment, maturity assessment, we have seen progress in this area. There is always more that we can do.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Karakia. Is that all?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Councillor
I didn't quite get the last one.
Last one?
Yeah, go, Knock.
No, that's right. I didn't quite get. I mean, it's kind of sounded, Giles. With all due respect, it sounded like it's just a standard answer. I mean, we've got a live situation going on with which is still going on. Anyway, I don't want to. Let's not bring that up. But it actually is about the whole kind of security, and particularly with councillors and all of that. But anyway, thank you. Over to you. Sorry, Nick.
That's all right, Nock. Yeah, a lot of the stuff, some of the stuff's already been mentioned, Grant, but first thing, just alluding to what Councillor Swiggs brought up about the baseline. We need a baseline. It'd be nice to see a baseline on the critical risk reporting, because then we know what we're working to. As far as the bike racks go, I know from my days of operating farm machinery and heavy trucks and vehicles like that, that you're not allowed anything extending more than 1.5 metres from the driver's steering wheel in front of the bus. So I would say that bike racks are unable legally to be fitted to the front of buses, because this will break that rule. That probably needs to be looked into more, but that's my interpretation of the rule when I set my heavy traffic many years ago and operated heavy vehicles. I sort of agree with what Nock has just said about the safety at our Durham Street premises. I think that there's more than enough processes and devices and people in place now that staff members and councillors shouldn't feel they cannot come into the building anymore. And then going on to the around company vehicles and things like that. What my understanding was that there was no induction process undertaken when Councillor Chair Scott got his car. It really worries me about the confidentiality, and that needs to be something around that now, not later. It's to me, it's hardly not good enough. And why did it take 9.5 months for someone to be alerted to the fact that they had been speeding? When I have been with a staff member who works for ECAN and they broke the rule by 12 k's to pass a speeding vehicle and were notified that day. So I think there needs to be some real hard questions asked around this whole piece of the paper, and we really need some strict guidelines going forward.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Ward. Councillor Karakia, you've got your name up again, your hand up again, or is it? No, maybe it's a ghost hand. Any other questions?
I'll take it down. Sorry.
Okay. Any other questions? I think we've sort of covered everything. Okay, then what I'll do is I'll put the motion. What I have done though, just before I put it and call for a mover seconder, I've taken the next steps, or a portion of the next steps, from page 78, just so that we continue to have visibility about the review process for the motor vehicle driver policy. If that's okay with councillors, that we add that to the resolution. And the suggestion is that policy will come back to us by the end of June.
Can that date not be brought forward? I mean, that's 7 months away.
Absolutely.
Well,
that's absolutely ridiculous.
But
so the review, we anticipate the review will be completed sooner than that, but we recognise that it requires staff engagement, union engagement, and also consultation with a number of parties. We anticipate it will be done by the end of June at the latest. We will endeavour to do it sooner, and we will engage councillors in the process. And obviously, Stephanie, as the Chief Executive, will approve it as a corporate policy, and we will build it into induction going forward, as we have indicated.
Thanks, Giles. Yes, my indication is that some of these things. This is about a policy report that will be with us as soon as we can, but by the end of June, at the latest. But in the meantime, staff are already as it says in the document here, they've already commenced critical risk training across the board, and things are informally in place at the moment. So that's why I've put this here. But, Councillor Pauling?
Sorry, Chair.
Nook, I'm just going to ask a question. Look, I think that one thing that's really important, I noted it there on number 16, that, it's a corporate policy, so Stephanie, was Chief Executive, will look at it, but bring it back to this committee and to councillors, because obviously it affects us too. And I think that's important. So I think while June 2025 might be the final outcome, maybe there's an intermediary report back process that we'll be involved in before then. I think that might help with the councillors' concerns, because I do agree that if we had a date that was a bit sooner than that we're going to have a bit of feedback on it, that would be helpful. So maybe, is that February or March, we could have that date. So that's the report back to us on some of the intended changes, and then June is the final. Could that work?
Well, so the intent is to engage councillors in the review of the policy, so that during that period there will be, how do we make this policy work for staff and for councillors? What changes do you want considered? And also in relation to that, how do procedures need to change or be updated? And to pick up the comment that Councillor Swiggs raised earlier, is what is the definition of a fleet car? Does it apply to all, only to branded cars? And I know that Stephanie would like to say something, which I believe.
Stephanie, you got a comment to make? Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I think the simple answer is yes, and we will provide a timeline and we will provide regular updates. There's no problem with that whatsoever.
So it just might be good to note that alongside this resolution, that there's a feedback point early in 2025. Yeah, is that possible? Like, can we amend the resolution?
Yeah, we can amend it. With regular updates to be provided. In the interim. And you can just put a comma with a small one. Does it sound okay? Does that sound okay to everyone?
I would like to just suggest a couple of other amendments.
Okay. Nope.
Okay. Hey, so at the moment then, is what I'm hearing is that we're still operating on the status quo around the policy. Is that correct?
Well, I think the policies, there is an existing policy that is being reviewed, because it's clearly, everyone's very clear that it's not satisfactory, and so I realise that. All I'm going to ask for is that two things that need to happen immediately on this thing. One is that where councillors are concerned, and maybe no one's got a car anymore because it's like a poison chalice under this policy, is that if councillors are using cars, is that two things. One is that if they are recorded by the GPS of going over the speed limit, they're immediately notified. And second, all of the information around with councillors and GPSs needs to be actually made, and we need to ensure that that information is confidential.
So the policy operates that anybody exceeding the limits specified in the policy, that information is made available to their line manager. In the case of councillors, that is the chief executive. So if I personally am speeding, I don't get the information. Stephanie gets the information, and she then has a conversation with me. And that will operate similarly if any councillor drives an Environment Canterbury car and exceeds the speed limit in the way in which the policy is currently set out. In relation to confidentiality of information, clearly with any request we consider the privacy of the information, and I know that General Counsel was heavily involved in the process around Chair Scott, and so that process would continue. We do recognise the importance of protecting confidential information and the privacy of individuals.
Well, with all due respect, can
I?
That wasn't the case with Chair Scott.
We are moving forward with a revised policy document that covers those things, and when we have discussions with councillors and there's discussion with staff, that all of those issues will come to the fore and a new policy will be arrived at that actually addresses the things that you're talking about, I'm sure. But so this is really...
Yeah, but it's going to take 7 months.
No, what I said was that there will be interim discussions that take place early next year, and our staff are clearly working on it now, and they're making a really good job to include and ensure that that references to councillors being notified of their driving habits is also part of that new policy. Okay, so I mean, I think that covers everything, and there's a clear recommendation that it's under review, really.
Well, yeah. I think a councillor, I wouldn't touch a vehicle.
No, same.
I think what I've heard that there is changes already that's been made, because in the report it mentions that now the reports are going directly to the Chief Executive, who will have one-on-one conversations where those speeds go repeated, moderate and excessive. So that is what's happening to the first part of your question, Nook. So that has been, I think, made effective immediately, while the policy is fully updated as well. So that's what I understand has happened. I don't know, Stephanie could confirm that, but that's, or Giles could confirm it, that we've made that change straight away, Nook. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Craig.
Okay, so are we all fine with that suggested extra resolution, just to ensure that there is some end date, if you like, and interim regular updates? Okay.
I'd be keen for maybe with an update in Q1, because I just think that's important, though, before we get to the final, that we are going to have an update and be involved in Q1. Is that okay? Q1 2025?
Right, in Q1 rather than interim.
Yeah, I think it's good to be specific.
Yep. I think that's a good comment, Craig.
Okay. It's all right.
Well, I'd say with an update to be provided, because then, yeah, with an update to be provided, not regular updates, just an update to be provided in Q1. Is that okay, everybody?
Yes.
With an update.
Yep.
To be provided.
Thank you.
Okay. Everyone all right? Going to put the motion? Move it. Okay. I'll put it. And receives the report of health and safety wellbeing. Notes that a review of the motorcycle and driver policy is expected to be completed by the end of June 2025, with an update to be provided in Q1 2025. Moved by Chair Pauling. Seconded by Graham McGlynn. Any further discussion? No. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move on to item 8.5, which is the risk update.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the regular risk update, drawing your attention to the dashboard at the back, which shows those strategic risks and the strategic level mitigations, recognising that the council continues to operate in a reasonably dynamic external environment, and we recognise the need over time to demonstrate the effectiveness of those mitigation strategies that have been put in place, many of which are and remain effective, but there's always more we can do. Just also want to draw your attention to the emerging risk in relation to Health and Safety at Work Act in terms of case law as it emerges, and also the work that's been done in relation to testing the readiness through Operation Pandora in terms of civil defence and emergency management exercise that was undertaken at the beginning of the month. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Just one from me, Giles. That item 5, the WorkSafe New Zealand's prosecutions in relation to other persons, part of the duty. Is that, and there's a case study there suggesting how that might happen. So is that something that we now need to sort of keep an eye on, ensuring that we are make sure that we're aware? As
Yeah, I mean, the reason that we've included it in here, and we're also getting regular updates at the executive team, is the emerging, changing and emerging position, in particularly in relation to health and safety, but other areas of the law, and how the advice that we provided can or can't be relied on from a health and safety perspective, linking into the arrangements we have as, just talked about bus operators. We have a PCBU responsibility, but that extends much broader than the workforce that we directly employ. And so we thought it was important to give visibility, and I know that General Counsel in particular is keeping a close eye on this area.
Yep. And will you, when we know a bit more information, will that come back to council as a bit of an update?
Yeah, so the intention is that we have this increasing visibility of this kind of emerging risk at ELT, and when appropriate, it will be included in future reports to this committee. Really, given that this one was particularly related to health and safety, we've included it in the health and safety report, but clearly it could be included in the legal update or in other aspects of our reporting to this committee.
Great, thank you. Councillor Southwood?
Yeah, just with respect to the matrices that are in the strategic risk dashboard, there's a couple of new items gone into there, but the ones that were previously there that have now moved position, they've all either got more likely or more bigger consequence. Like they're all the arrows are all heading in the more serious directions. And I'm just wondering, is this as the sort of like understanding of these as sort of bedding in that or is there some specific things that have changed that have shifted them into those places? Like it's not really clear to me why they're moving, and if there's something like an overarching reason for that that's sort of contributing to them all heading in those directions, or if it's just us figuring out how we feel, because they're quite subjective, some of those things. So I'm just wondering what's influencing that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Risk is a subjective art, not a science. I think in general, it's reflecting our increased awareness, and the ELT have 2 or 3 directors on each of these risks that we meet periodically to discuss them. But also, if you think about some of the commentary at the bottom in terms of the change in government legislation, the increasing impact of climate change, the change in our communities, and the technological changes, all of those are going to have an impact that is going to increase some of the risks that we're trying to identify. The conversation we had this morning around public transport, one of our risks is inability to deliver public transport services. Well, the conversation around the new NZTA guidance is clearly going to impact on our ability to deliver what our communities and our council wants.
In time, we sort of expect that our sort of collection of those risk put into these matrices will sort of embed and become more sort of fixed for a time. And then our role is really looking to see how we can shift those arrows back in the other directions. Is that, within...
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my introduction to this paper, one of the things we need to do more of is demonstrating if and how the mitigating strategies are being effective. So if the things we've put in place to try and reduce the risk are not working, then either the risk is completely outside our control, or maybe we need to do something different or do more work. So, the backlog is decreasing, so the sustainable consents process from one perspective is working. But so what do we do next? So we need to recognise the sustainability and effectiveness of the mitigation strategies in reducing the risk. So that's where we want to focus our attention going forward.
Okay. Councillor Swiggs, and then Graham again.
I'm relatively conscious of time, so I don't want to dwell too much, but I'm a little bit confuzzled about the effective relationships part. So the ineffective relationships with Papatipu Runanga, that is a probable. What is the reasoning for that to be literally probable? And the J, the relationship with central government. Now, are we talking about relationship with agencies and staff relationships, or are we talking about political relationships, councillors to politicians? So I think there's quite a distinction between those two.
So in relation to the relationship with Papatipu Runanga, I'm not in a position to comment. I haven't been intimately involved in that. I don't know if David wants to comment at all. In relation to the relationship with central government, my reading of that is it will relate to both, in terms of both the political relationship but also our relationship with government departments.
Yeah, I think we probably want to maybe pull that out at some stage and go this, because they are very different. The relationship that you have with NZTA as a staff level is very different than the relationship that we have at a political level.
Okay. Thanks, noted. Thanks, David. If you could.
Tēnā koutou e te komiti through the chair. So the assessment with regard to the partnership risk was looked at in the current political climate. It's not just in the context of council, which has a robust and healthy relationship with Papatipu Runanga, but recognising there's a wider context that's playing into this and changing the dynamics of the relationship. So there is every possibility that we could see deterioration if we're not continuing to mitigate and manage and engage with the relationship. So hence why it was rated as probable.
I think Nook's got some work to do.
Great, thank you very much, David. Graham?
Going back to Councillor Southworth's comments, I think this also shows that this organisation is developing its risk maturity, because it's understanding what risks are there and what the implications are there. And there is that wonderful saying, ignorance is bliss. And now we are sort of progressing through, we understand that. We understand the interrelatedness of various risks, that it may enhance another, if something becomes an issue and it materialises, it can increase other risks. And it puts us in a better playbook to be able to respond quickly and efficiently and manage the risks and understand the warning signs. So this is getting back to quote to Giles's comment, this is us putting better brakes in the organisation so that the organisation can actually go faster along the track. And I find it quite good to see the development that has happened over the last 5 years since I've been on the Audit and Risk Committee here, that there is definitely moving up the maturity. So I think it's good that we're identifying things as higher risk. It's good then that we can put in controls and responses in place. So I think it's very positive.
Thanks, Graham. Any other questions?
No, I'm just going to put a little sarcastic little almost thing in there to say, just don't go too fast, Giles, eh?
GPS monitored.
Okay. All right. No further questions. I'll put the motion. Thanks, Giles. That the Audit and Risk Committee notes the updates to the Strategic Risk Dashboard, notes the developments in relation to the law relating to Health and Safety at Work Act 2015, notes Environment Canterbury's support of Canterbury's Civil Defence Emergency Management with Operation Pandora response and recovery exercise on the 7th of November 2024. Do I have a mover? Graham McGlynn, seconder. Chair Pauling.
Yes.
Any further discussion? I just want to say thanks very much for that. And I looking at this dashboard, there's that middle section that says overarching sort of key mitigations and strategies, and that says some of the things that we're talking about: a cultural change within the organisation, looking at being more resilient, high performance leadership, all of those sort of issues that will help drive awareness of the risks at various levels. Any other discussion? No? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Right, okay. We'll now move to item 8.7. 8.6, sorry. The assurance update, and invite Giles to
Thank you, Chair.
speak to that again.
So this is the regular assurance update. Take the paper as read, but just draw your attention to a couple of points. Over the last 3 or so years, we've undertaken a regular programme of internal audits. Many of those have identified some reasonably common themes, and whilst there's always a role for undertaking internal audit, and that will continue, draw your attention to figure 1, which is highlighting that we really are looking to devote and support through assurance approaches the building in of appropriate controls, that when we have them in place, that we can then go on along and get some independent internal audit assurance that they're working effectively. And so we've identified those 6 areas. And obviously, we've talked about health and safety already. That will be one area that we want to look at, and we've also talked about contract management, etc. So we're recommending the assurance approach that reflects that broad church that assurance represents, noting the update to the internal audit plan, the proposed internal audit plan, but also importantly, the range of third-party assurance work that has been undertaken over the last few months. And just want to particularly highlight the summary of the work on the Kayanga Depot and Odeon facade, to recognise that Council and this committee will be interested to receive the full report. We wanted to make sure that we had a report and management responses that had been appropriately considered. There was delays in getting the draft report from our external provider, and rather than rush the process to get it to this committee, we wanted to take the time, but we do highlight the key findings for this committee there.
Great. Any questions on this report? Councillor Swiggs?
So on the internal audit standards that came into effect 9th of January 2025, is it mandatory to do a gap analysis in that? And actually, that would be the first question. Is it mandatory to do the gap analysis? I think if I was looking at, trying to...
Technically, it's not required for us to have an internal audit function as a council. I would recommend that we do have one, but we don't have to have one.
because when I was the only reason that I was reading or asking that question is because I googled what the internal audit 20, the latest one was, because I had no idea, and somewhere in there it was talking about that there was a mandatory process that had to do a gap analysis, and I was just wondering if we were going to do that, and if not, why not?
So, as we've said in paragraph 19, we will do the gap analysis, in an appropriate way for the size and scale of the organisation, and if appropriate, we'll report the results back and feed them into the approach that we take.
And that kind of leads me into the next question that I have, is that one of the things that does and bug me a little bit, internal audit point 11, page 87, there is no timeframes. Date to be confirmed, dates to be confirmed, dates to be confirmed, and given that that's one of the resolutions that we're passing to approve the internal audit plan, I think it was one of the resolutions, I feel a little bit reticent to approve something when there's no dates. Like, I'm not very keen on having open-ended things, because they never seem to. We can't keep accountability on these things from our level if we're approving something. So, what are the dates? Are there any indicative dates, even if they're just indicative?
So I think that's a good question, Councillor. I think the intent behind that paragraph was to recognise that these should be core components of the internal audit programme, given that we need to lift the maturity of those 6 core systems. But until we've worked out the capacity, capability and resources available to undertake the work, it would be challenging to commit to a timeline. So an example would be when we did the original audit on Holidays Act and payroll, we committed to a particular timescale because we envisaged that we would have made the payments and completed the remediation of the system by now. We have still not made the first tranche of payments, and therefore that audit has been delayed. Now, my anticipation is that in that instance, we should be able to undertake that audit towards the end of 25. In relation to those other areas, what we wanted to do was signal that these are critical areas that should be reflected in the programme, and that we will confirm dates when we are able to. But we can certainly put in dates that are an estimate at this point in time.
Yeah, and that does, sorry, Chair, this does lead me into the next part of my thinking here, is that I think we need to have some form of direction rather than leaving these open-ended. If these are critical areas that you've highlighted, we need to be putting dates on that so that we actually have some direction to move towards. And it also gives this council some guidance to what you've just said. There's not budget. It gives the council some guidance when we're coming to annual plan to go, this is critical work, this needs to be achieved by this point in time, this is what, this is the advice that we've given in the specialty committee. We need to be adequately budgeting or putting an adequate budget towards this. So I'm a little bit concerned.
It's not necessarily about money. It's actually about the capacity and ability of the organisation to achieve the change that's necessary to make it valuable to audit that area again. So most of the systems we've talked about, we've had an audit of health and safety or a review of health and safety. We've done a lot of work. We've identified the 11 things that basically will kill somebody. We've identified the critical controls. What we need to do now is build in the processes and approaches on reporting that is then sensible to audit. At the moment, if we went and audited any of those 6 areas, I could tell you what the report will say now, and therefore there's no value. We know, for example, in legislative compliance, it's been recommended by our external auditor that whilst we believe that we're legislatively compliant, we don't have a mechanism or a framework to formally confirm that we're legislatively compliant. So if we did an audit, it would tell us we have no mechanism. Well, we already know that. So there is no value in undertaking an audit. So it's trying to recognise that the value at the moment is in building in the controls and training and supporting the culture change of staff behaviour, rather than going along and undertaking an audit, which will give you a report and a number of recommendations, which will tell us things we already know.
Does that answer? I mean, really, I mean, this is a.
I've raised my concern, and I'll leave it at that. I just think we need dates.
Yeah. It's describing, I suppose, this report's describing an approach that is still being developed a little bit in terms of that. But I mean, I suppose what you're getting at is the work plan that we saw before with the policies and things like that. That it's something like that. An explanation of those with some sort of timeline beside it would be useful. Is that what you're after? Okay. Okay.
Maybe setting out some of the constraints and saying that this needs to be done after we've got to this point, so it gives a little more guidance, because I agree there's no point getting a review done too early when you already know what the problems are. It's really a post-implementation review that you're looking at to see, were the changes successful, are they embedded, are there any weak points that are still there to be addressed. So maybe in putting this, saying that we want to update and reflect, saying, well, there's no point doing the whole day's compliance until we've resolved the existing issues and got that all done and have any changes to the systems embedded. So a little more description about why is it to be confirmed might be helpful.
I mean, maybe to just try and illustrate, we are in the process over the next few months of replacing our FMIS and implementing a new contract management module. We know from the work that we've done to date that contract management can be improved, and we also know that our overall procurement processes can be improved. Putting in the technology is part of the solution, but it's not actually going to change people's behaviours and provide the culture change that we want to achieve in that space. So what we'll want to do is to, as part of the implementation process, use the skill sets that assurance brings to help us build in the right controls that make it very easy for people to do the right thing and very hard for them to do the wrong thing. When that is in place and we have some confidence, then we would like to get an independent view to go, is this working? And until that point, we're actually building the maturity and building on the recommendations that have already been made, and so doing the audit at the appropriate time to get that independent assurance. And we can provide more context.
Is it? I mean, you're really describing a process in item 7 about the checks, and we've got our internal process, and then we've got a second an in-house process, sorry, and then we've got an outsourced review process potentially. So if those three things might need to happen together. Any other questions? I mean, I think it's a good start. It's a change in terms of, you know, how you're setting up the risk assessment process, and we know that there's a few key things there that will need to be resolved. It's pretty good. Okay, if no further questions, we'll put the motion. What I have done is if councillors are in agreement. Just for this too, I was wondering if Councillor Ward and Councillor Karakia could put their speakers on just to make sure that they hear the resolution. Thank you.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Thank you. And so people are okay if I'm basically bringing this item this point from the next steps into the resolution, so that it has some visibility for us in the resolutions report that we get. Everyone's okay with that? Okay.
Yes.
I'll put the motion, and we'll include that with it. That the Audit and Risk Committee approves the proposed assurance approach notes the update to the internal audit plan, approves the proposed internal audit plan, notes the third-party external assurance activity undertaken or planned, and notes final reports including management responses for the fraud risk assessment, Kaianga and Odeon facade projects review, and the science peer review will be presented at the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting. Do I have a mover? Councillor Swiggs, Graham McGlynn. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried.
Aye.
230 this year, right? We'll carry on. We're just going to adjourn. Can we just adjourn for 10 minutes?
Just adjourn for a moment and we'll just check.
Okay, thank you. We're just going to go into Public Excluded and deal with a few matters there, and then we'll come back into the main meeting to finish off. So we're going to go back to. Are we?
Back to
Okay.
open, yeah.
We're now back in the open meeting, and we start at item 8.7, the Treasury report from Bancorp Treasury, and we're Brian Elliott. Brian, if you could please come to the table and just walk us through that one.
Yes, this is the standard quarterly report back from Bancorp. Unfortunately, they weren't able to attend today, so we'll largely take the paper as read. I'll just point out a couple of things to you in it. Obviously, it refers to the now well-known spiral downwards, hopefully, of interest rates, and that we should start seeing that in terms of decreased interest expense and potentially some reduction in interest income on our deposits at the bank. So a bit of a yin and a yang, but predominantly we'll get a positive effect on our bottom line from the downward movement. I also draw your attention to the fact that ECAN is fully compliant with all its Treasury policy items, and yeah, we are looking good at this point. Any questions?
Graham, thank you.
Just a wee note that although we're spiraling downwards since the election in the US in the midterm, there is certainly a spike coming back up again, as with the threats. So I suspect that the rates are not going to drop quite as quick as we were all hoping, especially if you're a net borrower there. So there has been a little bit of reaction to the US election there. So
Great, thanks, Graham. Actually, that's noted in item 12. They may not fall as fast as expected. So that's what you were saying. It's good. Well, it's pretty good to see, really. And the average cost of funds 4.36%, which is pretty good still. But I do note our debt level is now 104. But obviously it's being managed and it's not too bad. Any other questions? No questions. Councillor Swiggs.
Sorry, how much of that debt is natural capital?
At the moment, it's about 13 million at this point.
Thank you. Okay, I'll put the resolution. That the Audit and Risk Committee receives the quarterly report from Bancorp Treasury Services to 30th of September 2024. Do I have a mover? Chair Pauling, seconded. Councillor Southworth. Any further discussion? None. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8.8, which is the annual tax status report. And Brian, I was wondering if you could please take us through that.
Fundamentally, this is the first tax status report we've issued. It comes out of the new tax governance framework we implemented earlier in the year. Basically, it's trying to assure the committee that we are appropriately covering all our tax obligations and that staff are appropriately trained and there are no outstanding issues in the tax area which might trigger an IRD review or audit. So for this report, everything is clear.
Thank you. Any questions, Graham McGlynn?
I note at paragraph 8 we have had a couple of late filings of PAYE. I was just wondering how that could occur really and what the fixes are, although the amounts are totally immaterial, but it's more the principle.
Yes, I think the PAY issue was related to some of the more complicated manual adjustments that have been going on, manual pays, etc. And as you say, they're small beer. They basically were one or two here or there. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? None. I'll put the motion. Sorry, put the resolution. That the Audit and Risk Committee notes the tax status report for 2023-24 financial year. Councillors online, you've heard that presumably, and
All good here.
thank you. Do I have a mover? Graham McGlynn, seconded Councillor Swiggs. Any further discussion? I just got to say, Brian, it's, obviously we have a tax governance framework which is working, and it's good to see that everything looks like it's on track. Thank you. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, carried. Thank you. We'll now move to 8.9, Sensitive Expenditure Report, November 2024. Brian, if you could run us through the key points on that.
This is the standard oversight report the committee normally receives. In this report, there really is nothing of any particular matter for us to point out at this point. Any questions about it, I guess?
Councillor Swiggs.
No matters to talk about, but I just wanted to ask a question around some of these. Well, the first one, the consultancy contractors, there's quite a large variation there of $4 million against budget. I mean, it's in our favour, but my question here is, what are we not delivering? Because when I see underspends of this amount, what have we budgeted for in terms of our contract for the LTP with our ratepayers, and what have we not delivered on, or are we doing something different? I just wanted to understand where that difference is coming from.
I think this goes back to the earlier discussion we had about the savings, and fundamentally a lot of this is phasing. And in the original budget, to be honest, managers did a relatively poor job of phasing the budget. It was largely, whatever simple option they could choose. Whereas with the 3+9 forecast we've just produced, we've significantly changed that phasing. So now, we'll see the catch up in the next series of reports as they come through.
So subsequent to that, you've just said that there was a poor job done of the phasing, and is that going to be rectified when we do our next budgets, annual plans, long-term plans? Because I don't want to see this sort of stuff completely happening all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. We've basically looked at that from the 3+9 point of view, and that will roll forward into our next series of forecasts and then into the annual plan as well. It is an area for continuous improvement at the moment.
And one more question is that, how did we not have any budget for redundancy costs at all? There's a zero budget for redundancy, but why was that?
We just don't anticipate making people redundant, for it occasionally happens.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions? Councillor Swiggs?
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm asking all the questions, but I did have a question around the training budget. It's underspent as well. Have we got programs going on within the council to make sure that people are taking up their training budgets? Because training budgets are there for a reason. I want to make sure people are getting upskilled in their workspaces, and if I'm seeing underspends, I'm worried that people aren't skilling up in those spaces that we've got appropriate budgets for. So is that happening?
I think there's kind of two dynamics going on. One is that obviously the council is extremely busy, where we have a number of vacancies, so staff are having to work rather than train necessarily. But also there are some very large blocks of individual pieces of work, like leadership training, health and safety training, which aren't here now today being done, but they are scheduled for during the year.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Ward, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I actually Dion's basically asked all the questions that I was going to ask. One was around the training, redundancies, and also the fact that we've on the underspend. And I always get a wee bit nervous when there's been some underspend. What hopefully we haven't cut any critical expenditure that we should be addressing. And also I'd like to note, Deputy Chairman Ed said I'll have to exit the meeting now because I've got another appointment.
Yes, we still have a quorum if you've got to go to another meeting. But thanks for letting us know. It's great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That's all the questions. Thank you very much. We'll now put the resolutions. That the Audit and Risk Committee, 1, receives the sensitive expenditure report for the period 1st of July 2024 to 30th September 2024, and notes that there are minor redactions in the sensitive expenditure report in accordance with Section 7.2a of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 to protect the privacy of natural persons. Do I have a mover? Councillor Swiggs. Seconded Graham McGlynn. Any further discussion? No, all I was going to say, and you've already explained that to us, and it's some savings, and that item 6 is suggesting that there's a direct labour that's been underspent by about 2.5 in this first quarter. So, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. All right, carried. Thank you.
Just have to do an extension.
Right.
Motions that will bring it up to the screen.
Okay. Okay, so we're at a time limit at the moment, and we just want to extend time. We only have one more paper to go, or 2 more papers to go. Everyone happy if we extend the meeting for a bit? Okay. So pursuant to Standing Orders 4.2, no meeting can sit for more than 2 hours continuously without a break, at least 10 minutes unless the meeting resolves to extend the time before the break. So resolution that the Audit and Risk Committee resolve to extend the time required before a break of at least 10 minutes for at least 30 minutes unless the meeting is most completed. A mover? Chair Pauling. Graham McGlynn, second. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, carried. Thank you. So we're now going to move on to the insurance renewal. Okay, Brian, go for it.
Okay, fundamentally, every November we review and renew our general insurance policies. Those are the ones that exclude the large public liability and professional liability policies, which happen around about June each year. Basically, we've renewed the same suite of policies. We haven't changed those at all. There's been a small drop in premium because we understand that at last the market has moved for us in the sense that insurance companies are actually starting to look for business again. They're prepared to accept council risk. And so Vero and Chubb, who are our main insurers, have priced very well for the renewals. So,
Councillor Swiggs.
My question is, and that's cool, we've reduced the insurance cost. What was the budget that we had in our LTP for this year? We would have anticipated in the budget an increase in premium cost for insurance. What was that?
We would have anticipated about a 7%, I think, from memory. But we have to remember also that we have incurred a significantly higher premium on our public liability and professional indemnity insurance. So there won't be any change in that, basically.
Yeah, no, I'm not. My point why I'm asking that question is not for us to save money. It's actually to look at some of the other issues that we say in this report that we're not insuring on. I don't like the thought of saving money for insurance when I like saving money, but insurance is really important. So, with that reduction in cover, did you think about looking at some of the areas where we are underinsured or not insuring at this stage, because we've made some decisions in the past about potentially looking back and going, okay, now we might need to think about insuring these?
The only area of additional insurance we have been considering is cyber cover, but that is kind of underway at the moment because there's a substantial amount of information that needs to be collated to provide to insurance companies to quote it all on that. Our digital people are looking at the requirements of the actual application form and what they need to come up with, but that will take some time, so it wasn't able to come through in the November renewals.
And what about machinery and forestry?
Machinery, etc., we're fully insured. Yeah.
I might have misread, but what about the forestry?
All our main asset insurance is all fully insured at the current time. The only thing that there is a potential gap in, yes, is forestry or the stock banks. We have no insurers who are interested in those.
Okay. Graham McGlynn.
The small decrease certainly fits in with what I'm seeing at other councils and private entities. The market has softened a bit since the June rounds, so long may it continue. As far as the cyber goes, often the numbers of exclusions they have and the levels of cover and things, you're better to take the premium and spend it on actually your IT infrastructure rather than in self-insure that way, because it's one of those policies that the first thing you do when you put a claim in is go into a massive battle as to whether it's one of the 10,000 reasons why it won't be covered. So I don't have a lot of faith in general in the cyber insurance space. It used to be good, but they've just hardened up so much in their terms.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions? No further questions. I'll put the resolution. Notes that council insurance policies for material damage, business interruption, motor vehicle, public liability response and technical support, statutory liability, employer's liability, crime and fidelity, travel and marine hull have been renewed commencing the 1st of November 2024 and receives a summary of insurances renewed. Over mover. Councillor Swiggs, seconder. Chair Pauling. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's really good news and good work on doing the negotiating on our behalf to get this insurance, and I'm interested to see where this other insurance might end up. But it's interesting, the comments from Graham. I am concerned about some of the underinsurance that we do have in some of these very big infrastructure things that we hold. And I think there needs to be a conversation with the Crown about how we better manage the risk in that space, because downstream effects of insurance on some of the stuff is what I'm also concerned about. So if we're not adequately covered and we don't have the right balance sheets to cover these losses, then who's going to be picking up the bill? And that's something that I'm concerned about. So great that we got that to here, but I do think there is a little bit more work to do in the insurance space, especially around some of those real critical risks, especially in the light of climate change and other impacts.
Actually, I was just thinking that's the climate change thing you mentioned. That's, I think, in terms of forestry, for example, it's just uninsurable really because of climate change, fire risk, all of those sort of things. But anyway, I just to say that the insurance renewal program has been approved by the Chief Executive under delegated authority as from November the 1st. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Okay, we're on our last item. Is it last item? No. 8.11. The annual register oversight, fraud register, gift and hospitality register. Okay, where you go, Brian? If you could update us on that.
Yes, this is just the standard annual compliance report. Things of note really are that the most recent examples of very small frauds that we've had occur are to do with the mobility scheme, the total mobility scheme, and those items are actually being investigated by the companies that were affected, predominantly taxi companies. A lot of the controls around total mobility are actually outside the control of the council because it's a national program, but that's where it has occurred.
Are there any questions, Brian? I mean, it's good that you've got that list there, and obviously we're addressing any issues within those in terms of fraud or investigations to see if there's fraud. So that's really useful, and obviously we'll try to develop policy and oversight to reduce those impacts later on. So no further questions. I'll put the resolution receives the fraud register and notes the additional entries related to 2024, receives the gifts and hospitality register and notes that both the fraud register and the gifts and hospitality register are reported to the committee on an annual basis. Do I have a mover? Graham McGlynn, second. Councillor Swiggs. Any discussion?
I just want to sort of say, and I just putting it on the record, that I really have some very big concerns about the total mobility scheme, especially with the spiralling costs of that scheme at the moment. Good that there's been some movement from this point of view, and I understand that there is that review of the system, but I really need to say I've got a lot of concerns about it, especially from what I've also heard. So that faster that gets done, and then put the asset on the Ministry for Transport to get that done, because the costs are ridiculous.
Thanks, Councillor Swiggs. No further questions? All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Well, that's the last business for today. Again, before Brian departs, Brian, all the best for future, and you're probably going to have a really good holiday. Okay. So the next meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee will be held in 2025, and the date's still to be confirmed, but it's probably be mid-February sometime. So I'll now declare the meeting closed at 3:11, and invite Chair Pauling to close with a karakia.
Right, nei te mihi kia koutou, mō koutou mahi I tēnei ahiahi. Ai, kia koe, Brian, kia pai tō mahi hau. Good luck into the future. Thanks for all your work here. He karakia whakakapi o tātou nei hui. Unuhia ki te uru tapu nui o tānei, kia wātea, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takatū, ko e rā e roko, whakiiri aki ki roka, kia tīna, haumi e hui e tāki.
Thanks, members. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you.